Welcome everybody. I'm speaking from the warmth and splendour of the Scottish Riviera. So I hope it's as nice as in your place as it is here. We've had 3 excellent inputs so far in the day, and we're now looking for answers to all the questions that have been raised in the preceding sessions. And our speakers this afternoon have guaranteed personally in writing that they will provide the answers to the issues that we've raised today. The format for this session, very simple. We'll ask each of the 4 speakers to talk for around 8 minutes apiece, and thereafter we will have an open discussion with questions and comments. If you've got a question that comes to you during the course of the presentations, please add them into the chat box, and we'll monitor that, and we'll make sure that everything's covered by the end of the hour. So with no further ado, I will hand you over to the speakers, who will introduce themselves as we go along, and we'll operate in the order that's listed on your programme. So in 30 seconds, I will hand over to Tom Lowe, who will introduce himself and start answering the question, post-pandemic learning and teaching, how well are we coping? Tom.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, SEDA, for inviting me to come and speak today. I was particularly struck by the keynote presentation at the lunchtime today, where we really heard about how technology has dominated the future of pedagogy. And I want to speak quickly on that topic. My name is Tom Lowe. I work at the University of Portsmouth, where I'm a senior lecturer in higher education. And I'm also chair of the national network RAISE, which is a network for those interested in researching or developing student engagement in higher education. I think reflecting on the pandemic and the lockdowns in particular, the first time we went into lockdowns, and the main reason we went into lockdowns in the 3 different times during UK's take on the COVID-19 pandemic, was for safety. We went into lockdowns for safety, and we moved the majority of learning online for safety reasons. We then perhaps rushed back to campus, and I think we rushed back to campus for financial reasons, because universities needed students to stay on, to keep paying tuition fees, and perhaps even further, cities needed students to return to pay their rent and to pay for different services. So we began with safety and we moved to financial reasons. I think then a lot of workers and learners had tasted flexibility, and we kept things online for flexible reasons. Staff said, I like working at home, it's cozy. A student said, I like the convenience, I like the flexibility, I like the ability to decide on the day. And I use the analogy, well, if it's raining outside and it looks cold and miserable, perhaps more of us made that decision to tune in online rather than go in person. But then even there was government pressure to put universities back face to face. And I would say that was for political reasons, that we wanted students to be occupying full-time student status to keep youth unemployment down. And we wanted universities perhaps to return to the status quo of lots of young people returning to cities, paying lots of rent, and making maybe lots of middle class and upper class people a lot more richer. And perhaps maybe a political view of that's just how universities should be. So I think a lot of the behaviours of going on, and the keynote spoke at lunchtime around technology being a great focus, has been for safety, then for financial, then for flexibility, and then for political reasons. I think there's also something to do with popularity as well. Now, the point I want to make for looking at learning and teaching going forward, none of these talk about pedagogy. And my message today is to say we need to start having awkward conversations, having tricky conversations. And I think we need to start talking about trade-offs. And I think many of us in this group will have the ability to begin those conversations at our institutions. And if I just finish off, I've worked at 2 universities in the last year. One university mandated staff attendance on campus. One university doesn't mandate staff attendance on campus. What has happened? Staff have had high flexibility, high work-life balance, but the community is completely gone in staff spaces. Similarly, at another university, one mandates student attendance on campus. One doesn't mandate student attendance on campus. At one university, students are being told to come in and they're asking questions why they are there. Could this not be online? And the other, student physical attendance, has gone out the window, and students are box setting their degrees. They're not even tuning in live. They're waiting and watching 8 lectures in a weekend. And some students are even watching degrees in 1.5 speed. And that makes many people shudder and say, this isn't good for learning. So my message is, now it's time to have those conversations of what is better for learning. And we all remember those conversations when we say about the NSS, when a lecturer will say, well, my module is the boring one or the hard one. My module isn't fun and it will never be entertaining. We need to start having tougher conversations about what is best for learning and what is best for students and what is best for our communities. And because there are trade-offs, we move everything online, make everything flexible, we will lose less community. We will lose a student-staff relationship. If we make everything optional, then content may get missed. So we have to be thinking and having these tough conversations. Otherwise, our universities are going to drift off in directions that we heard of today, and perhaps we will lose what we are known for in UK higher education. So that's my piece for you, around 8 minutes or so.
Presenter must unmute himself. Okay, thank you. One of the questions that has come up in the keynote so far is this whole question of student attendance. And I think it was one of the earlier speakers said that students were not coming in anymore. Is that your experience? I'll just ask that one question before we move on.
I've worked at 2 universities in the last year. One didn't mandate attendance. So I worked at one university, and you can look at my LinkedIn to find out who these are, which still was recording lectures in the room. So for example, there was a choice: you could tune in online or you could turn up face to face. And that was an overhang from COVID-19. So people with COVID could still keep up to date. And that was leading to and also the lectures were recorded. That didn't just lead to students tuning in online, it led to students just not turning up, and they'll watch the recordings in a Netflix style when they want. At the current university I'm at, Portsmouth, they are saying, we are not recording. Recording facilities are not in every room at all. And if you want to go to the lecture, you go to the lecture. And if you miss it, you miss it. So it's a tougher approach, but at Portsmouth, it's like a pre-pandemic university, very busy campus. And I hope that better student staff community and relationships are coming from that too.
And have students reacted to that not recording edict? Or
I don't think it was ever on the table at Portsmouth. So I think so. It's very interesting. Dr. Zachary Spire speaks about this. Some of the things we brought in during the pandemic, if we were going to keep them, if we were going to take them away after the pandemic, we had to take them away right away. If you keep them even for a bit, 6 months or more, students will say, whoa, you can't take this part away. It becomes part of the core business. I think my prior university, Winchester, they've kept the live recording for so long. You can't take that away now. It's become part and parcel. So, or you can teach it out. But it does lead to the identity decisions of a university. What kind of university are we? Are we a highly flexible university, or are we a university that emphasizes face-to-face contact, in person, and that campus atmosphere? Now, there's trade-offs there, because the flexibility points I made about earlier, the celebrations of blended learning or online tuning, online catch-up learning was brilliant for students who are neurodiverse students, for students who are time poor, for people who are just ill one day and can't make it to campus. You are eliminating the engagement opportunities by choosing to go back face-to-face, only live in person, one chance to see it. But on the flip side, you go the other way, we are seeing tweets right now from lecturers saying, I've got an empty classroom. So it's very interesting. What I'm endorsing is to talk about it. I'm not necessarily endorsing a permission. I worry that these pedagogical conversations are not happening for pedagogy reasons. They're instead happening for financial reasons or political reasons, or popularity reasons, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I think we will come back to that somehow. Niamh was nodding her head there, and she's our next speaker, so I will hand over to Niamh.
Hi guys, so my name is Niamh. I am the faculties officer in UL Student Life, which means that we have a system in UL where we have student representatives. We have our student president, our student academic. I'm basically just under the academic on the ground helping out. So I'm also a full-time student, so I'm in my final year of bachelor's in applied physics. So I would have been a first year when the pandemic started, and I'm now in my fourth year. So I've had the full kind of view on pre-pandemic learning, post-pandemic learning, and then things that happened in the middle. So I agree with a lot of what Tom said. I will admit that I also did the box learning. I did a box set, definitely, especially for certain modules that were absolutely ridiculously hard. Now, I will say that during the pandemic, we were a little different over in Ireland. I'm from Limerick, by the way, so we are over in Ireland, and we came out of lockdown a little bit slower than the UK did. So we went in March, in March 20, so we had until May in lockdown. Then we were meant to kind of go back on campus in September, but then that completely got shelved. And then we were allowed on campus for labs only for the first semester, and then we were fully online for that second semester. So we were only all allowed really back to campus in September of last year. And that was even in a limited capacity, that only under students that had modules that were only under 100 people were allowed on campus. Everything else was online. So it was really a blended learning factor, and it still is this year to an extent. All classes are back, but a lot of lecturers offer the option of having an online version and an in-person version. So that whether that's putting up recordings from last year or putting up some tutorials, but it really depends on the module you have and the leader that you have for it. In regards to mandating lectures and lecture attendance in Limerick, we have a bit of a housing crisis, and it's across the country, to be honest. We took a survey there in student life earlier on this semester, that stated that 26% of our students are homeless. So whether that's commuting, whether it's sleeping in someone's sleeping on a couch, or renting a room 2 nights a week to come to their in-person lectures, we've a serious housing crisis in the university. So a lot of the time we can't mandate our lecturers to say that, oh, you have to come to campus to get points towards your grades. Some lecturers are still insisting on doing it, and they're technically not allowed to. So I've had so many people come up to me this year saying, hi, I live in Mayo. So for reference, that's about a 5-hour drive from us, or 5 hours on the bus up and down. And they can't come to campus because they don't have accommodation, and it's 80 quid a night to get a room in some hotels. So they can't afford to. So they're missing out on 14% of their grade. And that's a 2-3 grade point difference in like the university. So we can't exactly do that. We can't mandate that students come to lectures. Now, I will say that this year we do have a number of students that are coming to campus. So we haven't really had the issue of empty lecture halls. I know attendance has been down, especially in the last few weeks, but that's traditionally been the way. Like even when pre-pandemic, we would have a limited attendance in the last couple of weeks, because it really depends on the lecturer and the material being taught, and especially the last couple of weeks mightn't be on the final exam, so people might want to maximize their time. But it is a bit of a difference this year. Like people are choosing to not go to lectures because either they can't afford the petrol or the diesel to drive down, they don't have accommodation, or they're trying time management wise to see what works best for them. Like, I know that we definitely have kept a lot of the continuous assessment schemes that we would have put into place on campus and in the university over the pandemic. So for instance, the rule was for online learning that we could only have a maximum of a 50% exam online. It was basically so the system didn't crash, because sometimes you'd have people, up to 200 people taking a module. So we had that system in place. So the maximum exam you could take was 50%. That has changed because we're back on campus fully now, but we do have a number of modules that would either have 40% continuous assessment or 30. Now, this was a thing pre-pandemic, like continuous assessment. It's not the first time it's happened, but it's definitely more prevalent. So I, for instance, took a module last year that we were one of the few modules allowed on campus, and the continuous assessment was 60%. So the final was 40, and that was done in the interest of, in case things go back online, we have the option where we don't have to have a massive test at the end. So my highest test last year was a 60% test, and my lowest was about a 30. But this year, my lowest is a 60, my highest is a 70. So we do still have that kind of continuous assessment system that is still in place. We have taken a lot from the pandemic. A lot of tutorials are online again. A lot of lectures are put online. A lot of the help centres, so we have learning centres for science, maths, we've got a writing centre, and we've got an ICT centre as well. So a lot of those have online appointments and in-person appointments to help people that wouldn't be able to come to campus. Like, we've always had an accommodation crisis in Limerick for as long as I can remember, and I've lived here all my life. But The problem was with the pandemic was a lot of people moved home that would have been in student accommodation to save on rent, but then a lot of people chose that time to also move out of home and move in with their friends, so they wouldn't not see their friends for 6 months, or wouldn't not see their partner for 6 months. So we then had, when people were coming back to campus, both sets of people wanting to go for a room, and we just couldn't accommodate the people. So we do have that serious issue, and we're we probably have the worst issue for accommodation of the country, but all universities in Ireland have that issue and have that problem. So we can't exactly go back to the way it was fully. And I don't think we'll be able to for a long, long time to come. So I think I might hand it back to Peter, but that's kind of been my talk.
Okay, just a quick bit of clarification for folk who are not familiar with your system. You mentioned that you get grades for attendance. Do you want to say a bit more about that? Explain
so,
that.
Previously, pre-pandemic, sometimes lecturers would give attendance grades. So sometimes you'd have a sign-in sheet at the end. Sometimes we have these clickers that would answer like multiple choice questions. So if you clicked in and your number would be registered, you therefore get a number for attendance. So sometimes like it would be random attendance. For instance, I had a maths module that went for 5, it's only like 5%, but every class we'd be asked to sign a roll call or like a roll sheet at the end. And then some of my lecturers have continued doing that this year. But a lot of lecturers have taken that into account, that people can't always attend the in-person version. So a lot of lecturers aren't grading for attendance. So the continuous assessment grade would go towards an essay or a multiple choice quiz online or a lab report, an in-person test, things like that instead.
And is there a standard for how much that's worth, the attendance is worth overall in terms of the course?
In my own personal experience, the maximum it's been is 5. However, I have seen some modules this year that have gone into the range of 15%. So that could be because it's a poorly attended module over the years, but depending on the department you're in, like a number of our degrees have to be to a certain standard. So for instance, in the physics department, we have to keep our degree to a certain standard. Hence, we had to have all in-person tests last semester and last year when the pandemic was still ongoing. And we were one of, I think 13% of modules were allowed to be in person, and all 5 of ours had an in-person test. So it's keeping the standard as well. So lecturers can't make continuous assessment too high a value at the same time. So it really depends on the module, it depends on the department, it depends on the faculty. But there are attendance works across the board in different subjects.
But it does sound as though individual lecturers have got quite a lot of freedom in terms of deciding how much percentage they offer to different assessments and what have you, because I know
they can do, yes.
Yes, because that is very really different in other universities. Yeah.
Like we do have a standards board, like at the start of the semester, every lecturer has to put out their assessment plan on what they plan on doing in terms of final assessment and continuous assessment. So it really depends on the faculty and the department, but your marks for how you teach the module have to be in by the start of the semester, really. So it is reviewed by the department, and if it's an iffy or like it doesn't seem completely right, it will then go to the faculty, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, thank you, Niamh. We have not got Amina, I don't think yet, have we? No. So we will turn to David Walker, who is raring to go.
Peter.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Tom and Niamh said, thank you to SEDA for inviting me to contribute to this session. My name is David Walker. I'm the Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor for Education and Students at the University of Brighton. And I want to share my thoughts with you, which I think build quite nicely from what you've heard from both Tom and Niamh. And just from the end of Tom's input, where he talked about the future of the sector, I think that's what I'd like to pick up. Because for me, the future of learning and teaching for us is inextricably tied to questions around the future of higher education and the future of the universities that we work in. So the question for me is, what are our universities for? The pandemic period, I think for all of us, I think we would agree was a period of intense uncertainty for those of us who were working within it. It was one of immense complexity and a period of rapid change. But what I would suggest to you all is that the future looks no less uncertain. Indeed, we're facing a series of new pressures, many of which are extensions of old pressures, some of which are somewhat different. These pressures that we're facing are well known to us. So we have a broken funding system, certainly here in the UK HE environment. We have a cost of living crisis. I don't think that's unique to the UK, but certainly is a major issue for us at this time. We have a political narrative in this country which is focused on graduate outcomes and low quality courses. And we have a more intense regulatory environment than we've ever had before, and a regulator who's very intent on being much more interventionist. So this gives us a whole set of new challenges for us to consider as we emerge from this post-pandemic period. But what I would suggest is, as we emerge from the pandemic, we have an opportunity to reflect. We can reflect on what we've learned. We can reflect on what worked well and what didn't. What worked well for our students, what worked well for our academic communities as well. And I think Tom suggested, that we've seen significant challenges in terms of that community dimension, that sense of belonging and connectivity. Some institutions during the pandemic made some very bold strategic choices, particularly in relation to how they teach, but also in terms of how they assess. And we've just heard a little bit about that there as well. Some of these choices, I would suggest to you, may prove to be very shrewd in the long term. Some of them might be somewhat premature. Time will tell. For me, I would suggest to you all that now is an opportunity to reflect, but more importantly, to reset. In the current environment, I would suggest it's not a question of what our universities are for, it's what is our specific university for. And that's about thinking about the mission of the institution, what its purpose is, the student groups it seeks to serve and support, the communities it's located in. If that question is interrogated appropriately, that should commence with questions of pedagogy. It should inevitably lead to discussions of learning modalities. We've seen lots of discussions and lots of outputs relating to nature of delivery, whether that's high flex or hybrid or whatever you wish to term it. We need to think about how we can best enable the different student groups and communities we serve to benefit from an education that our institutions can offer. How can we support them to engage in more flexible learning pathways? These discussions are also inseparable, I would suggest, from questions around the future of our curriculum. And I think, again, as we look at our institutions, many institutions are currently undergoing some form of curriculum review exercise at this time. I don't think that's surprising. It's also inseparable from questions around our teaching spaces and the future of estates. Are they required? What sort of estates do we need in the future? How do we effectively embed skills within our curriculum to meet the needs of the economy, to meet the needs of industry and of employers? How do we encourage action to address global challenges and promote a social agenda? How do we work with our local communities and the industries and professions within which our students are eventually going to join? And how do we engage our students in shaping their education and their wider student experience? I think, as we've heard from Justin in the keynote, which was absolutely superb earlier, some of the discourse tends to be technologically deterministic. And I think what we need to try and do is move away from that. For me, while technology will inevitably play a really key role in the future of teaching and learning, pedagogy has to be the starting point. We have to start in conversations about how we teach and how we can support our students to learn in the most effective means possible. How do we support our students to succeed? Resetting does not mean we have to snap back. Resetting provides the opportunity to determine a future educational strategy which is built on a meaningful, planned approach to learning and teaching. Pedagogically informed approaches to learning and teaching ground in our institutional missions and values, and also a strategy formed not on the basis of an emergency response, but of a planned, considered approach that puts our students first. What I would hope we would hold on to in any future of learning and teaching is some of the focus that we've had on community that Tom was referring to earlier. And I think we're beginning to see some of the challenges with the different models different institutions have employed post-pandemic. I'd hope we'd also hold on to some of the learning that we've gained around transition and the real need to support transition for those students as they come in through and out of our universities. well-being is rightly a focus, and a heightened awareness of accessibility and the impact of poverty in all forms of learning and teaching. And we've just heard of some of the challenges that our students are experiencing. Digital poverty was put into the spotlight during the pandemic, but digital poverty didn't begin in the pandemic. It began long before that. So in summary, for me, I would suggest to you there's no singular future for learning and teaching. There are multiple potential futures that we might consider. And this is grounded by our institutional needs, our values, how we seek to serve our students, our communities, and the industries that we work with, and also inevitably global pressures. I suggest to you we must continue to focus on supporting our students. I think that really has to be at the heart. We must put students at the heart of everything that we do. We must seek to improve their outcomes, and also we must also acknowledge we have to work with the regulatory environment that we're part of. How we develop, support and value our staff will also be key in this. And I think that's something we must not lose sight of. So we must and can learn lessons from the pandemic. Our future necessitates, however, a breakaway from this emergency response that we've adopted. And I think this cycle of rapid change, I think now's the time to reflect, now's the chance to reset and build positively to a better future. So hopefully I'm in time, so I'll stop there. Thanks, Peter.
You are in time beautifully, thank you. And obviously the first question is, okay, if we need to reset, where do we start? David, where do we start? Where are you starting perhaps in your university?
I think what we're starting is from the question of the curriculum. We're starting from how do we want to teach? What sort of educational opportunities do we wish to provide our students? So my own institution is a practice-based applied university. That is where we have particular strengths. And as you can appreciate, in the context of the pandemic, we were significantly impacted. I think there was comments earlier in the chat about how students really were impacted by not being able to engage in laboratories and fieldwork, etc. And for an institution like mine, that was significantly impacted, and it was a major challenge. So for us, it's about looking at our strengths. What is our strengths? What's the type of institution we are? What's our values? We're reflecting on our curriculum. We're looking at how we can provide the best educational experience we can to support our students to achieve their academic and career goals. And then we're deciding what we don't want to do. And there might be spaces that we don't want to engage in, but we're very much committed to the skills agenda. That is what we are as an institution. So, you know, we haven't made some of the choices that some institutions made during the pandemic. And as I say, they may be proven to be shrewd. But I think now is a chance, as things begin to stabilize, to look at some of the learnings from the pandemic and to make informed choices, not ones emerging from a sort of emergency response.
Okay. And what's the most important lesson that you and your institution have learned from the pandemic? Easy questions first.
It's really, really important to continue to have a meaningful dialogue with your students and with your staff. You know, we were going through immense pressures. We were having to deal with immense complexity. You know, even I was having a conversation just yesterday with someone. If you go back 12 months, we were at the beginning of a new wave of COVID when the Omicron variant emerged, and already we have come to a different stage 12 months later. And decisions that you made at that time are being, if you like, unpicked. We're now looking at a different future than we would have just 12 months ago. So, you know, the pace was fast. We were having to make decisions quickly. And some of this showed us as institutions, we can be much more agile than I think we realized we could be. And so there is things there that are positive, but some decisions were perhaps made in haste. Others were really, really beneficial. So some positives, some negatives, but I don't think we can be too hard on ourselves because it was a very, very challenging time.
Okay, thank you for our speakers. It's somewhat ironic that we've been talking about attendance for quite a bit because it appears that we have lost our fourth speaker. So we have a bit more time for discussion. So what I'll do is I'll aim to pick up some of the points that have come out of the chat box, and I'll invite folk to come in and ask them personally. So if I pick a question, if the person who asked it wants to come in and talk, unmute yourself and start talking. Otherwise, I'll rephrase your question and offer it. So I would like to start with Tom Cunningham, who has a question for Tom. Tommy, first, Tom Cunningham, are you there do you want to answer? Yep.
So
Carry on, sir.
I've been asked to expand on the popularity reasons that are worrying me, and is this linked to pedagogy reasons or NSS scores? I can expand on that point. I'd like to first to say, remember, students are humans and students are adults, just like we are all humans and adults as staff. And I see these same trends in staff just as much as students. I use my convenience, or perhaps use an even stronger word. Sometimes we're seduced to work at home because it's raining outside, it's cold outside, it costs money to go in as well, which is a really strong point as well, important point. And then we think, oh, actually, I just fancy tuning in online today. That's quite nice, that's cozy. And I think, you know, we are seeing, I'm at a university now, I said that mandates student attendance for class, but staff have a full choice at Portsmouth. And I'm seeing the campus staff attendance just plummet at the moment. It's very interesting, of course, cost of living, but also I think the weather too. Now, in regards to popularity reasons, I think that's an interesting thing to respond to. Universities can be in a place because of the NSS pressure that we want to keep students happy. But I would say the key to student satisfaction actually is well-managed students' expectations. And that's one of the main keys. And also to kind of really step back and think, actually, are we talking about a short-term satisfaction post-pandemic of saying, actually, we'll make it so you can tune in online so you're happy today? Or are we talking about satisfaction at the end of experience, which is the NSS? So I think actually sometimes we can maybe go with a decision that we think is better for students learning, or know is better for students learning, that students might not like at first, but in the long term, they will be happier from that. So the point that David was making around putting students first is really interesting. So putting students first can sometimes mean, some people will think that, I think, okay, we'll do what the students want us to do. And we're having this challenge in regards to skills development, employability skills development, and diversity of assessment. So for example, when we have conversations around, we need to start embedding employability into the curriculum. That's my job at Portsmouth. So how do I embed employability into the curriculum and support lecturers to do that? Students won't like that necessarily at the time. They might see that as boring, but we're starting to make that mandatory into summative assessment. But actually that is in the best interest of the student long term, so to support them on their graduate journey. So putting the students first isn't just necessarily doing popular things that the students like at the time, it's doing things that are going to benefit their career or their grades or their skills development. And again, we have this debate a lot. And again, this is all trade-offs. I endorse talking about it. I don't endorse a certain decision or pathway as default, because actually I think the decision between blended or online, or pushing students to do things that they don't want to do versus what they always want to do, is contextual and different for each different discussion. But another example discussion which I can use as a parallel is when we say to students, no, you need to do this kind of assessment to become a graduate of this course. We're having lots of accessibility discussions around assessment choice for students, greater assessment choice, but then we are balancing that with discussions of saying, well, actually, you can't choose not to do some assessments just because you don't want to do some assessments. That's part of the skills development of the degree. So I want us to have that debate. And I think managing students' expectations, as I've said, is one of the key things that we need to do to keep. I find as soon as a student is in limbo or they're confused, that's when students get most upset and most grumpy, or if we've given information out. In COVID, it was impossible to manage students' expectations without a crystal ball. Even the government couldn't manage student expectations. But actually now we can manage students' expectations. We can predict a bit further ahead. And I completely endorse everything that Niamh and David have said around, actually, it's not just about what David said about flipping back straight away. It's learning the best parts of the pandemic and reapplying them to maximize student outcomes, but just being very aware of what we want to protect as well and return to.
I wonder, Niamh, would you like to comment on that in terms of what you think students want? Let's assume for a moment that we could resolve some of the issues about accommodation. What would then students want from education as it will develop over the next 5 years, say?
Honestly, I think that I know what Tom was saying earlier about managing what's happening to a student, and David was saying letting the students choose and kind of listening to them a bit more. I think that managing like not only their expectations on what their degree is going to give them, but also managing the amount they're giving the students to do. Like I know we had a serious issue here where during the pandemic, because everything was online, I think I had 40 assignments for one semester. So that was a 12-week semester, and I had 40 assignments and finals to take. So it was a lot for a student to do, especially like I'm in a tough enough course, so we would expect to have tough assignments, but we were told, no, your exams are going to be made harder because you're online, your assignments are going to be harder because you're online. And it did create a lot of stress. So I think managing that for students, especially as we're looking at like in a continuous assessment line, just making sure students have enough time to learn the material and not have to box set it, as Tom was saying earlier on, because I know at one point I definitely had to box set because I just didn't have enough time to watch my lectures or go to my lectures and still get everything done. So I think definitely managing like the amount of things we give students to do. Not only that, but employability wise, it's grad program time in Ireland. We're looking at different grad programs from when you're graduating. I'm staying on the university, so I'm doing a PhD next year. But I know a lot of students who are looking at grad programs and looking into ways to get into grad programs. And in our course, we were kind of told at the start, oh, look, you're in a degree where it's a science field, you're going to be snapped up immediately. Students aren't. Now that's partly financial reasons, that's partly economic reasons. A lot of, especially in the tech sectors and in the science sectors, a lot of different companies aren't taking on students. So I think preparing students on how to get a job and how to do interviews, how to have a proper CV. Now, in fairness, my university is very good in regards to that. We have this thing called co-op. It's cooperative placement. So we take 9 months of our semester, 9 months of our third or second year out of college, and we go work for a company. Now, it does mean that instead of a 3-year bachelor's, we have a 4-year bachelor's, and instead of a 4-year master's, we'd have a 5-year master's. But it does mean that when we come out of a degree, we're more than likely to have an offer from the company that we worked with to get a job with them afterwards. So it does mean like our university has one of the highest employability rates in the country because we have the co-op program. We're one of the only universities in Ireland that does this. I know people in UCC down in Cork and UCD that don't do as much placement as we do and have to do summer internships instead and still have a 4-year degree and find it a lot harder to get a job after college. So I think even offering more placements to students, telling them, okay, these are kind of the jobs you could do, because we have a dedicated co-op office over here that'll get us a job to take for our 9 months, and it's almost always, it's definitely paid if you're in science and engineering. It's not like you have a chance of being paid if you're in arts or humanities, but if you're in the science side, you're always paid because of the work you're doing. Like that could be working for a company, it could be working for the university, it could be working for research centres, for laboratories. A lot of people work for government institutions or work abroad as well. So it's definitely something we have at least, and was hampered a bit by the pandemic because a lot of people couldn't go and have that work experience like they normally would. They'd have to either work from home, which wasn't great because you wouldn't know the company and you wouldn't know who you were working with. But thankfully, when I took my own placement, I was able to at least go into the office and get to know people and get to know the job. So it is a way that we help students try to get a job after our 4 years.
Let me come back to you, Niamh, with a question that on a different topic that's come up, which I'll then throw at Tom and David, which is a question about how universities should revise their estate, the buildings, the facilities, to make them both more attractive for both and more convenient for both staff and students. Is there a student view as to how the estate should change?
As in the
buildings,
kind of
the facilities,
yeah, we do have a few views over here about that. So one is the library, for instance. We put in a beautiful library there about 5 or 6 years ago. It opened just before I came onto campus. It's a lovely place, but there isn't enough space for students. We have a new policy in the library that comes in towards the end of our semester. So it's been in since the start of November, that if you leave your seat for more than 45 minutes, your bag will be moved. So that means you don't get much of a lunch break. You have to stay in your seat. There's a few contentious issues in regards to the library. There is a whole floor for postgrads, and postgrads make up about a fifth maximum of the population in UL. So should they have their own floor in a 3-floor building? We don't know. Also, in regards to like the state of certain facilities, like even in the library, we have the older part, which doesn't have a lot of plugs working, doesn't have a lot of heating as well. So you'll be more likely to go to the new part. We are also starting to run out of building space in regards to holding lectures. We keep, UL has increased the amount of students it has going to the university every year. So when I came here 4 years ago, it was 13,000. We're now up to 18. And we were at 9,000 about 10 years ago. So we're increasing our student population whilst not increasing the standards of some of our facilities. Now we have some lovely new buildings that have come in the last, maybe the last building that was built was maybe 5 years ago. But we do have buildings that have been there for 30 years and are in the same state. And that there might be, as a woman in STEM, there isn't a lot of bathrooms for women, for instance, in my part of the building. So physics have their own department, but if I have to find a female bathroom, I probably have a 5-minute walk to try find one that's working. So it's things like that. And I think a lot of students know that they might be crammed in a lecture hall, and especially when you have to take an in-class test. We had tests this year where we didn't have enough room for everyone to space out within 2 desks, so you wouldn't be cheating. So we actually had to change the room we were doing the test in just to facilitate everyone coming in for the full lecture. So we do have a lot of issues in regards to like the state of some of the buildings. And then we've another issue where we have timetabling issues in UL as well. Our campus is massive. We have a lot of buildings spread out a serious amount of area. Like there's bridges, there are all different kinds of floors, all different buildings. Part of the college is in Clare, which is a whole different county. So trying to get from one building to another building as well, a lot of students don't like that as well, because it makes you less likely to go to the lecture if it's a long way away. So we've a good few issues in regards to that.
Okay, right, a few things to resolve there. David, what about you? How's your estate getting on, and what are you doing to improve it for both staff and students?
Thanks, Peter. I mean, I think this is again another complex question, isn't it? And it goes back to the discussion we're having about the direction that different institutions are going to take. So those institutions that are perhaps deciding to offer different modalities of study. So, high flex study will be investing heavily in their estate to support that form of delivery. Others that might be engaging more in truly online modes of delivery will perhaps be looking at reduction of estate. For us, as a practice-based university, we of course are investing heavily in providing the best facilities that we can to support that type of educational experience. Can't forget as well, I think we've talked, I think Tom talked about the importance of the financial dimension, and Niamh just talked about the growth of student populations. Many universities are growing student numbers because of the diminishing resource they have. The inflationary impact is really taking its toll on institutions. So, for us, we have to compete to recruit students. We think we have an outstanding educational offer, but as students look to us, as they look to other institutions within our region, your estate is an important part of that decision that the student makes as they make that huge investment, that huge choice in coming to any university. Now, failure to invest in your estates and your facilities will effectively just diminish the number of students who will choose to come to you. That then has another effect on the institution. You have even less resource than you had before. So it becomes a bit of a vicious circle. So for us as an institution, it's about ensuring that we have a campus that is sticky, that our students want to be part of, that they can build that sense of community and belonging, to build their confidence. It's one that supports, high quality practice-based education. For different institutions who've made different choices about their strategy, they will be investing in different ways. And that might see, a change in use of spaces, and might even see them disinvesting in certain spaces if they decided, to work remotely, for example. I think we've seen some suggestions in the chat, different people working, different flexible working arrangements. So what does that mean for, staff spaces, staff offices? So lots of these discussions, I'm sure, are happening in institutions up and down the country. So there's no one single approach to this. It's going to depend on your institution, what they're doing, their approach to agile or flexible working, and the way they wish to recruit students.
I'd like to pick up a comment made by Giles Martin, where he asked the question of, should we change the academic year plan to cope with some of these pressures? Giles, do you want to come in and expand on that? Maybe you have an answer to that question.
I don't have an answer. We see what anyone else thinks. Well, the discussion was, Niamh had said about the pressures the students are under, and we're seeing it increasingly, the pressures eating into independent study time. Full-time students just aren't full-time. Basically the short version, and that's because of the amount they're having to work at the moment. So are there other options we should be considering? I mean, the loss of reading week that we had here was reported as a big problem because students were getting behind, and then that was when some of them were catching up. I don't know, I think it's worth putting out there. We currently normally teach in a fairly compacted part of the year for undergraduates. Obviously, that has a lot of impacts on staff, estates use and other things like that. But is that one of the things we should look at again?
Okay. Let me pass that baton over to Tom Lowe, because you obviously through RAISE, you talked to a whole number of universities. What are any thoughts about changing the academic year?
Well, I think individual universities, each will have their own format for their academic year. My critique is that universities are often horrendously wedded to keeping and protecting that academic year cycle. And perhaps we're guilty of often designing degrees and designing how we run our courses through that academic year. And it's often quite staff orientated how we design things, and often quite campus orientated or semester date, quite 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And as soon as a degree falls outside of that traditional method of an undergraduate humanities degree, let's say, that student experience normally suffers. So whether that's MBA students getting taught at the weekend and all the catering facilities are shut, students start thinking, well, this is a bit rubbish, or nursing students that are taught over a longer academic year, but the library's not open during those time. I think all of those things need to be considered. I think degrees should be designed around the students who they're intending to attract and the employers they're intending to send those students on to. My big critique of the part-time student market at many universities is we just it's not a part-time degree, it's often a 50% degree. We cut it in half, and at best we push it into the evening and say, there you go, you've got a part-time course, it's accessible. I think we need to design courses around students more, and the point that Niamh made around 40 assessments in one semester is just completely unacceptable. Where we are guilty as module leaders, we often design our module in a silo, and we should be looking at whole program design. And as part of that, looking at when students are assessed, how much we are collectively as lecturers expecting of one student in that journey. And I think when we review things from a student perspective, we can see how much we're asking of students. So my last couple of years at Winchester before I came to Portsmouth, I was tasked with auditing the student experience, because so often we work in silos as lecturers and as professional services, but we're all trying to pull and engage with students. And the only person that's united in all of that activity going on in our university is the student. And the poor student is often pulled in 50 different directions. And I think the task I have not done yet at a university is audit the emails we send to students as well. Because often we say, oh, students don't check their emails. Well, I think student emails are quite chaotic because they've got every professional service getting in touch and every lecturer and all these things. So I think there is a need to look at the academic year, but look at it in regard to students' journey and what type of student they are, whether that's an MBA student who's a working full-time manager, or that's a full-time undergraduate history student. But don't be straitjacketed by our academic year. And I am impressed with what's going on here at Portsmouth. We have a lot of degree apprenticeship courses. So the policing degree apprenticeship course has 16 entry points a year. So you can join the course at 16 different times. That's probably a really extreme model, but it shows that we don't have to be locked with this September start or January start only, and that we can't possibly go to work on certain dates of the year.
There's a comment that's just come in from Colin Beard from our keynote from earlier on about the relationship between academics and estates and facilities. Does it need to be strengthened? That resonates with me. Colin, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, I used to get very frustrated about the fact that in many educational institutions, not just higher education, the design of the buildings never really listened to they never listened to the voice of those who use it every day and teach in those buildings. And a breakthrough came for me when I started working with a professor of estates, and he took me to see places in London like E.C. Harrison, who knew how to do open plan properly. We had conversations. I used to sit on a lot of meetings with estates and facilities, knew the facilities director, and eventually got invited to one of their conferences, the Association of Directors of Estates of Universities. In fact, it was in Belfast. And I remember standing up and saying that I was a good teacher, not because of estates, but really because I knew how to teach, but that nobody really listened to what we wanted and what we needed in the classrooms. And I remember the university, Sheffield Hallam, giving me some money one day to tidy up a mess left by consultants. And I brought the states, facilities, architects, IT and academics together and set them all in different tribes, recognizing they all had different languages. And I remember embarrassing an architect because I said, would you just come and write your name on the whiteboard? And still to this day, we have whiteboards that come down when you switch the PowerPoint on. And that's the only one behind the screen. And so he had to go and stand behind the screen to write his name. And then he sat down and I said to everybody in the room, what's on the wall over there? And they said 6 coat hangers. Have you ever seen a student hang their coats on that one? No. Well, why don't we put some whiteboards? I remember coming back a few years ago from Taiwan and seeing glass whiteboards in the boardroom in AIG. And I then introduced the idea of glass, less degradable whiteboards that could be tried out with all sorts of colors and so on. And we and the estates people, great sharp intake of breath, glass. And so I've really enjoyed that journey, though, in many ways, because the conversations were opened up. We listened to each other, and I realized that they do live in a different world. They're talking people flows, leaving and coming into classrooms, and complications in the corridors about safety, glass, and they have to look into all those things very carefully. They have to do a lot of statistical analysis. They're looking for longevity, durability. But the more we listen to each other, and especially with architects and so on, the more we can have those conversations and make sure our voice is heard. So I think that's a message, and that's something I've learned, if you like, the long and hard way, is I have to find the time to voluntarily go to their meetings, listen to what they're saying, make suggestions, because I am somebody who uses the classroom every day. So I'd quite like to have my voice heard, but I do think we all perhaps need to put a little bit of effort. It's quite hard, but a little bit of effort of having conversations with these people about what we'd like, but finally to say, don't have those conversations if you don't know what you want, because they have found over the years that if you ask teachers what they want, they get 1,000,001 different answers. So that's difficult for them.
But I think the other side of the coin is if you actually can get all those folk in the same room with a kind of concrete plan, and to develop a concrete plan for a particular building, because I managed to do that on a couple of occasions in Bradford, it can work wonderfully well. In the chat box, we have so a couple of lovely inputs from James Wisdom talking about the architectural drawings for the University of Surrey, and I urge you to have a look at that and perhaps follow that up. But perhaps I'm getting conscious of time. I'd like to bring in Susan Morangarcia, please, if I may, because your last comment was talking about program design, and I wonder whether that's a way of bringing us back to where we almost started today. Susan, do you want to comment on, expand on that comment about program design?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, fine.
Lovely. Yeah, I was just reflecting on some of the things that have been said today and some of the things about recalibrating, and it always makes me smile that we're still having to say things like we need to go back to basics and we need to look at program design. So one of the things we've tried to do at Brooks, and it's not just me, it's everybody here doing things, it's not my thing, is look at how we help people think what is the student experience and what are they experiencing when they're going through a program and through a module. And we as academic developers, have the classic sort of faculty partner role, helping people work through those with those questions that are focused on, well, what is your student experiencing? How are you going to help your student do X, Y, and Z? And that might be around employability skills. It might be around digital capabilities, it might be around subject content, and it really is asking the lecturers, the academic staff, to really think about what does it feel like to be that student doing this, and then separately, I've been trying to get, I put a comment in earlier this morning. I've been trying to get people to think about get away from this binary divide that we seem to be in, where we've got online versus face-to-face. And our should we say, our senior leadership, or some of our senior leadership who come from old school, can't really get their heads around the fact that actually we're now in a much more blended world, and actually what we should be thinking about is using technology in a temporal sense. So are we using asynchronous? Are we using synchronous? And that goes back to the questions this morning we had around problem-based and flipped learning. And also what you've just been talking about now, how are we using the spaces and places that we have available to us? Because there's lots of constraints, there's lots of rebuilding and reformatting goes on different campuses. And just, sorry to go on, but with very quickly as well, all this, the constraints and what have you. Some of us hate, I put the comment in, some of us hate the open plan situation that we find ourselves in, and I guess it also goes, so I could see Niamh also nodding away, it sort of goes to the, you know, how do you work with others in the library situation when it's a very big open space, and I'm guessing that's might be one of the reasons that they're having a postgraduate floor, because their postgraduates are seen as more serious than undergraduates, but it might also be an office issue around what facilities they have for them on campus. So yeah, Peter, I know you didn't invite me to say all of that, but I've been bubbling away all day.
Thank you. No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. All valuable. I am, however, conscious of time, and I think we've only got about 2 minutes left. I think there's one thing that's come out for me in this hour is all the divergence that's kicking around, all the diversity in terms of practice and policy from different places. And I suspect that there's a role for SEDA over the next couple of years to try and investigate, publicise, get people to talk about some of those differences and to see what actually works in this new world that we're approaching. I'd like to give Niamh the last word. From a student perspective, is there one perhaps message or suggestion that you would like the academic staff to take away from this hour? Where's she gone?
I think go into talks with your students in an open mind.
Yes.
We do have, especially the older students, whether they're BSc or BAs or MAs, MScs students, we may not have been here as long as you, but we've definitely seen a change in the university over the last couple of years, and we've a lot to bring to the table as well. Now, thankfully, our lecturers over here do happen to do a lot of that, but take our thoughts into perspective in regards to markings and gradings and systems.
Lovely. Okay. We also had quite a lot of discussion in the chat box about assessment. I would, of course, recommend program assessment, but we haven't got time to talk about that. Going back to the chat box, Mary's just said we'll circulate recordings. Take good care. Enormous thanks to all our speakers. A word from Claire Power about meeting carbon zero. That's another thing we need to take account of. And also recommended there from Wazan about consistency around modes of learning, and an interesting link to follow up on that. So thank you everyone for contributing to the discussion. I hope you found it useful. Have a Merry Christmas and goodbye from the Scottish Riviera.